$1,974. That's your Social Security check. That is also your retirement income. Not part of it. Not the base layer underneath a pension or a 401k. The whole thing. $1,974 a month from the first of the month to the last for the rest of your life. You've known this day was coming. You just kept telling yourself the plan would solidify before it got here. The side income would become real income. The IRA you started 3 times and drained twice would finally have something in it by the time you needed it. None of that happened. And now you're 63. Your employer has been calling your position restructured in memos for 18 months, and the number on the Social Security Administration's website is $1,974. You stare at it for a long time. Then you do the math. Rent or mortgage, utilities, car insurance, food, prescriptions. The math takes about 45 seconds. The math does not come out right. This is the part nobody covers when they talk about Social Security. They cover timing strategy. They cover spousal benefits and break-even calculations at 67 versus 70. What they don't do is sit in a quiet room and walk through what a life actually looks like when $1,974 is the number. When there is no other number. When the spreadsheet has one row. You are not alone in that row. Roughly 40% of Americans over 65 rely on Social Security for the majority of their income, and about 12% rely on it for essentially everything. 12% sounds small until you do the population math. That is millions of people for whom this is not a backup plan. It is the plan. Social Security was designed as a floor, not a ceiling. The original architects of the program said so explicitly. It was meant to prevent destitution, not fund a comfortable retirement. The average benefit in 2025 is just under $1,900 a month. The federal poverty line for a single adult is roughly $1,255. So Social Security puts you above poverty. The median household expenditure for Americans over 65 is about $4,300 a month. You have $1,974. The gap between those two numbers is not a rounding error. It is a complete life reorganization. The first thing to go is location. You've been living where you've been living for reasons that made sense when you had a salary. The neighborhood you know. The doctor who has your history going back 15 years. But that location has a price, and the price is incompatible with $1,974 a month. The median rent for a one-bedroom in the United States in 2025 is approximately $1,430. That is 72% of your entire income. Before food, before utilities, before the prescription you take every day. The shift. You stopped thinking about where you wanted to live and started thinking about where you could afford to live. Those are completely different questions with completely different answers. So you look at the map differently. The mid-sized cities in lower-cost states where a one-bedroom runs $750 to $900, and there are enough other people in your situation that you wouldn't be invisible. Chattanooga, Knoxville, Wichita. Cities that don't make the retirement magazine lists, don't have the Instagram profile. But cities where $1,974 is a real number, not a cruel joke. You run it. $850 for rent, $140 for utilities, $100 for car insurance. You drive a 2014 with 91,000 miles on it, and you maintain it carefully because you cannot afford not to. $380 for food, $210 for prescriptions and copays, $180 for the phone, internet, and the one streaming service you kept. That is $1,860, which leaves $114. $114 is not a buffer. $114 is the distance between you and the moment one thing goes wrong. The first rule. On $1,974 a month, you are not managing money. You are managing risk. Every dollar you don't spend is defense against the thing you cannot predict. A car repair, a dental bill, a rent increase, a medication that gets pulled from the formulary and replaced with a version that costs more. You are 63. You did not expect to be here. That sentence is true for most of the people in your situation. Almost none of them expected this. The survey data on retirement readiness has said the same thing for 15 years running. Most Americans believe they will figure it out before they get there. And then they get there. You find a one-bedroom in Knoxville, $840 a month. You sign the lease. The shift. Moving was not admitting defeat. Moving was the first real decision you made inside the actual numbers, instead of the numbers you wished were true. The first months are an education in what you actually need versus what you got used to having. The cable goes. The twice-a-week restaurant habit. The subscriptions that accumulated over years of not paying attention. All of it, gone. What's left is the life in its actual form. Rent, utilities, food, the car, the prescriptions, the phone. Everything else is extra. And extra requires planning. If you want to visit your daughter in September, September starts getting funded in January. 8 months of $30 here, $40 there, held in a separate account you don't touch. This is education, not financial advice. If you are approaching retirement and the numbers are not where they need to be, talk to a qualified professional before making decisions. Healthcare is where things get tested hardest. You are 63. Medicare starts at 65. The gap between 63 and 65 is 24 months, and it is one of the most financially dangerous stretches for someone in your situation. You cannot afford Cobra at roughly $700 a month. You go to the ACA marketplace. At $1,974 a month in income, just under $23,700 a year, your subsidies are significant. You qualify for a plan with a monthly premium in the $0 to $80 range, depending on your state. This is the part nobody tells you. The income level matters enormously, but your deductible is $4,500. That means for the first $4,500 of medical expenses every year, you are paying out of pocket. A single hospitalization runs straight through that deductible. The out-of-pocket maximum on your plan is $9,100. That is close to 5 months of your entire income. You stay healthy with a focus that becomes its own kind of work. You walk every day, not because you love walking, but because you cannot afford not to. Medicare at 65 changes the math. Part A, hospital coverage, is free if you've paid Medicare taxes for at least 10 years. Part B, covering doctor visits and outpatient care, runs $185 a month in 2025. Your income is below the IRMA surcharge threshold, but $185 comes straight out of the $1,974, which means your actual deposited check is closer to $1,789. You planned for this. The budget adjusts again. The second rule. Medicare is not free retirement health care. It is subsidized, complicated, and full of gaps that cost real money. Price the gaps before you get there. The car is the variable that keeps you up at night. Everything else in the budget is roughly predictable. But the car is an 11-year-old machine you depend on completely. The grocery store, the doctor, the pharmacy, all of it requires the car. You set aside $75 a month in a car fund. Straight transfer, same day as the Social Security deposit. In 14 months, it absorbed a battery replacement and a brake job. Both of those, without the fund, would have been emergencies. With the fund, they were annoying. The difference between an emergency and annoying is the difference between a stable month and a month where you don't eat the way you should. The shift. You stopped thinking of the car as transportation and started thinking of it as infrastructure. You don't defer infrastructure. Deferring infrastructure on a fixed income is how small problems become disasters. Year 2. You have found what works. The library on Tuesday afternoons. The farmer's market on Saturday, cheaper for produce than the grocery store, and somewhere to be in the morning. The neighbor across the hall who is 71 and has been doing this longer than you, who told you about 3 months after you moved in that the first year is the hardest, and $114 of margin has, after 18 months of discipline, grown to $620 in a savings account you do not touch unless something breaks. $620 is still not a real buffer. But $620 is not nothing. $620 is the difference you built, dollar by dollar, out of $1,974 a month, by making every decision count. If you're watching this and $1,974 is close to your number, drop it in the comments. You'll see you're not alone. The third rule. The number in the account is not just savings, it is proof that the math can work. Even on Social Security alone, building a buffer is the thing that keeps the plan from feeling like a sentence. The Social Security system is running numbers of its own that are worth knowing. The trust fund is projected to pay full benefits until somewhere around 2033 to 2035 under current law. After that, incoming payroll tax revenue would cover roughly 75 to 80% of promised benefits if Congress does nothing. Congress will almost certainly do something, as it did in 1983. But what that fix looks like, whether it involves higher payroll taxes, a raised full retirement age, means testing, some combination, is not something anyone can predict right now. The fourth rule. The life you can afford is not the life you planned. But a life you can actually afford is more stable than one you're trying to sustain on numbers that don't work. Stop fighting the math. Build inside it. At 67, you crossed a threshold you did not know you were working toward. Not a financial one, something quieter. The neighbor from across the hall was moving to be closer to his daughter. You helped him carry boxes to the car. He stood by the door for a moment before he left and said, "You figured it out. You said you weren't sure you had." He said, "You've still got the apartment and the car and the food in the fridge. On $1,974. That's the whole thing." 4 years of this. 4 years of the Tuesday library program and the Saturday farmers market and the car fund and the $114 that became $620 that is now $2,100 sitting quietly in the account you don't touch. 4 years of the life stripped down to the things that keep you housed and mobile and healthy and connected to other people. It is not what you planned, it is what you built. Somewhere tonight there is a 62-year-old opening a browser and typing, "How much is Social Security?" and watching a number appear on the screen. They think this story is about whether $1,974 a month is enough to live on. It is. It is also about what you find out when the only thing standing between you and the question is the answer. You find out exactly what you need. You find out exactly what you don't. And you find out, slowly and not without cost, that the life you can build inside a hard number is more yours than any life you lived inside a number that left room for the things you never actually needed.